Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Coach Beasley here coming at you with Photoshop and our learning objectives and output for our new lecture 4, which is going to go into the brush tools for coloring and painting. So we're going to take this hour and a half and kind of go through the different options that we have available to us and what we're going to be able to do with the limited now with what we got with the limited time we have. We're not going to go through every brush and every option and every tool. We're going to go over the main brushing tools. So paintbrush, pencil, the mixing brush tool. Those are going to be the main three. We're going to look at the options that are here. You have these couple of tools to go after. You have options to go after that we're going to be covering in what we are going to be doing. So let us get started. First thing I want to show everyone is the lecture 4. You have your class files. In the class files here, what you're going to have inside of the folder, I'm just going to bring open my version of it. So a little bit easier to see because you have kind of a visual thing going on. First thing is this file here called extract colors. We're going to use that. I'm going to show you how to go to this website of Coolers, which you learned in the lecture 3 with the color theory, to extract colors out of here. So I'm going to show you this new thing that they have here for being able to pull colors off of here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file here after I go through just kind of a primer on how the brush tools and everything work. We're going to color this. So I'm going to color this thing, or at least get started on colorizing it, kind of like a comic book artist would do. The colorist of a comic book company would go through the process of doing. And I'm going to be using this picture here to pull the colors off of. I've already done that. So I'll just show you what I did. And I'll even probably add that palette of colors in if you want to do this yourself on your own in the process. I'm going to show you what I did and how I did it. And then, using this extract colors file here for it. Now, what you also will have, going back to our lesson plan here, you will have this how to use the painting tools. This is a PDF that covers everything I'm going to be talking about. Your different painting tools, like your 2 different main panels that you would use with your brush tools. Also, your options bar with all the different options that are there. I'm going to try to cover them and what we're talking about, and all of the multitude of options with blend mode, opacity, the ink flow, and that sort of thing that goes into it, the details. So utilize this PDF to kind of go through and understand what you have in the details of things there. So just be aware so you know what you're looking at and what you're looking for. Now, to get started, let me open up our presentation. Mastering Photoshop's brush tools here. Let me go to my full screen mode to kind of cover this here. So what we are going to be doing here today is going through our different brush tools in Photoshop. So the learning objectives is to understand the base tools. A lot of different tools that are in Photoshop work off of the paintbrush tools options. Picking a brush, setting up those brush options to be able to paint and be either artistic with it or be very practical with it. There is a difference. If I'm doing color correction and photo retouching, I'm being very practical with a certain set of tools, brush tools that are going along with that. If I'm being a little more artistic, now I'm opening up the brush panel and kind of playing with the different artistic options that you have to make different types of painting effects happen with what I'm doing. So you can create custom brushes. You're really not creating custom brushes. What you're really doing is creating custom presets. You're setting up the brush to custom, in a custom way to paint a certain way like you want. And then you have the ability to save that as a preset. So you can come back to it on another day. And that preset's already there. It's already chosen. It's ready to go. And you don't have to do anything else. It's actually pretty simple and easy to do once you get through the process. So, main brushes we're going to cover: paintbrush tool, standard brush tool, plus your pencil tool, which allows you to create a hard edge line in your painting. It just looks different than your regular brush tool with the way that it paints. Your mixer brush tool allows you to mix multiple colors together. This is where the artistic part kind of comes in, because you can create some very interesting things, especially on a photo that already exists with color. You can paint over that color and get some real cool things going on. If we got time to, we'll talk about the art history brush. If not, I'll try to maybe make a different video for that. The art history brush is one of these unique tools that allow you to get this stylized effect happening with your painting, but you have to use it in a particular way. It's not, I won't say it's not the most intuitive. It's just depending on how you like to use it. You may like it, you may not like it, but it just depends on how, you're wired and how you think through the process. For me, it's a little goofy, but it works. You just have to start it with a particular way and try to use it. So the first thing we're going to look at with the brush tool are the settings that go along with it. So you have some settings up in the options bar. You have two panels as well that you can go and set some options. And depending on what you set, depends on what you get. Now, we're not going to go through all the settings because I want you to be able to discover on your own some of these. And at the same time, it's just a matter of time. We don't have enough time to go through all of them at one time. Um, Creating customized brushes. Again, like I said, a lot of times you can create these custom brushes on your own and then save them as presets. That's better than trying to make a brush from scratch. That's kind of the idea of creating custom brushes is instead of creating from scratch a brush, you can take the existing brushes, customize them to what you want, use them as a preset. You also have the ability to import brushes from third-party outside sources and bring them into Photoshop to use them here. And that sometimes is much better. So this is just another slide talking about the brush presets. I already talked about that. This is some of the options you have with those brush presets that you can set. Opacity, flow variations, wetness settings to get like a wet paint, effect like a watercolor or see watercolor paints or water-based paint effects and that sort of thing. Combining brush tips together. You got this thing called a dual brush that you can do. You got blend modes that you can set. Opacity you could set. There's a lot of different options, and we're going to go over a bunch of them to try to give you an idea of how you could set everything up to be able to paint like you want to, whether it's an artistic type of thing, or like I said, it's more of a standard thing like color correction or photo retouching that you're painting with. Real world application, photo retouching, color correction is more of the standard output that you would do. And then digital art creation is where you're being very artistic and setting that up. So you got two types of applications with things. The rest of this presentation is just the assessment preview, like you've seen before, with some sample questions there and some discussion topics that you can come up with to kind of talk yourself through some of the outputs of things. Alrighty, that part's done. Let's move forward and go into Photoshop. And I'm going to make a new document here. And my new document, I'm just going to use a standard 12-inch by 12-inch. The resolution really doesn't matter, but 96 or 150 pixel per inch kind of doesn't matter. Whichever way you want to go when you're just doing this experimental phase with things. You can kind of leave everything alone. Just have a large enough space to kind of work on. Now, your paintbrush tool is your brush tool here in your toolbox. It's the letter B on your keyboard for brush to pick from there if you want to go with the keyboard shortcut. Hidden underneath there is your pencil tool, your mixer brush tool, this color replacement tool here. This allows you to take an existing picture that has a color in one spot, and then you want to pick a different color and replace that. So this way, highlight, middle tone, shadow kind of stays, but you're changing the color. We'll look at that to experiment with that too a little bit later on. But let's get to the brush tool. With the brush tool, you will have your options bar where you can pick your different options of your brush. The first set of options, the very first button here next to the house looks like your brush tool. If you hit that drop down there, this is for your presets. Now, I got this current tool only checked on, so you would probably see it like this by default, but current tool only, if you get that checked, you're only seeing the options for your brush presets. So once you make them, you'll be able to see them here. There is a little button here that allows you to make these brush presets. Little new button there, little square with the plus sign, universal new button. Next to that, you have your different brushes. Now, at first, your brush panel is collapsed down sort of like this. So I expanded over and out by using the lower right-hand corner of the brush panel here, just to open it up so that way I could see the majority of the brushes. The brushes are in these little folders, kind of grouped together with the more artistic brushes and the more general brushes. The general brushes are the ones you're going to use the most in your standard, regular photo retouching, color corrective world, painting and drawing and that sort of thing. The other brushes are going to be the more artistic type brushes. And with the brush presets, if you look at some of these other brushes here in these different groups, some of them have in the top right corner of the brush choice, got a little icon sitting up there. That little icon has to deal with what type of tool is going to be used with that brush type. So some of these are associated with your regular paintbrush. It looks like a little paintbrush there in that top right corner. Some of them are associated with other brush-based tools. Like this one is associated with my eraser tool for erasing away using these particular settings. So when you pick that tool, when you pick that particular brush, it switches you to that tool so you can use that tool. So if you're not paying attention, because I've done this before, you'll select the tool, you'll select a brush, switching you to a tool you're not prepared to use. And you're wondering why something's not working. Well, it's because you're on a completely different tool that's not related to what you're trying to do. So that can be a problem or it can be an issue. So just make sure you're picking the right thing. Now, with every tool brush, with every brush that you pick, what you're going to have at the top here is the size of that brush, which is how big or small the brush is. If you move, if you got this size window here enough, you can change the size of the brush. You can move your cursor off to the side and you can see the size of the brush. That's that circle that I have here for my cursor. So that way I could tell if the brush is too big, too small, before I get out of this little window here. You also have this hardness level, which you really can't see right now. So the only way to really show this to you is to illustrate this in a different way. So the brush that I pick, I'm going to use this hard round brush. Usually you double click, that'll select the brush and close the window. You have to pick the color you want your brush to be. So through my color picker here, the foreground color, I'm going to pick this black for right now. And I'm going to click in this empty space. Oops, I forgot I was playing with this stuff before. So I got to change all these options that I'll cover a little bit later. One click creates that brush. The flow is too low. Hold on. One click creates that brush with that hard edge. So you see that it gives you that circle there. If I change the hardness level to 0 on the brush and click again in a different spot, see what ends up happening? I get this kind of faded where it's solid in the center and it fades out towards the edges. So this is good when you want to paint and blend colors together with the painting, or if you're doing color correction or photo retouching, blending that corrective effect in with everything else in the picture. You want to turn the hardness level of the brush down. So all the brushes will give you those particular options of that hard edge versus that soft edge painting with the hardness level. So you can use that to your advantage as you need to. Now, next button over here in the options bar is this button that looks like a folder with a brush on it. It opens up your brush settings. So you have a brushes tab and you have brush settings. So brushes is the same brush panel that I was just looking at. It's the exact duplicate of it. It's just outside of the brush options there in the options bar and just over here to the side. Brush settings gives you different settings based on the brush that you've chosen. You will have some of those same size and hardness options there, but you'll also have the spacing option that you can go with. And I want to show you something here with the spacing on how it works. Traditionally, the spacing number is about 25%. That's what it's set to. You have a preview underneath these settings that'll show you what the brush looks like when you decide you want to try to use it. I'm using this hard round brush because I want to turn the spacing up and show you what you're actually doing when you're painting. So what you're doing is you're taking the shape of the brush and you're repeating it multiple times based on the spacing here. And the higher you go with the number, the further apart each shape is going to be. So the opposite, the lower the number, the closer those shapes are together. So what I like to do, 25% is still not close enough. So I usually turn it down to around 10% or less sometimes, depending on the type of brush that I pick, will give me a smoother kind of painted line. So I like doing that when it comes to my brush. One of the customizations that I try to do. There are other customization options. There's shape dynamics, there's scattering, texture, a dual brush option where I can add more than one brush to the same shape, where I can add like two or more brushes together. So I can pick one brush tip type and then have another one that I can pick along with that to give me a different looking brush. Why you want to do that? Completely up to you. It's a creative thing. But you have all of these different options that you could pick from. Some of them are controlled by um, a what is called a jitter. A jitter is basically randomizing the effect, whatever that effect may be. And a lot of times the randomization doesn't happen if the control option that goes right after it is turned off. So when you turn it on, you have a fade option, which will work with your mouse, that whatever that jitter effect is going to be, it fades out after a certain number of steps. And I don't say pixels because it's not pixels. It's based on the shape and how many shapes get laid down at one time. So remember that spacing. If I turn that spacing up, not as many shapes get used. If I turn it down, more shapes are used at one time in one stroke. So when it gets to this number of shapes, it fades out. That's how that fade works. Now the other ones are working off of that Wacom tablet. So if you got one of those, like the Intuos or the Move Ink or any one of those other types that have pen pressure and tilt and that sort of thing, you can have that be the basis of the control for the jitter effect. So jitter just means randomness, just a variable that happens based on a particular control that you put on. If the control is off, it's not really going to do much with the jitter effect, whatever it may be. If it's on, then you have to control it with the mouse using the fade, or with one of those pen tablets, you can use the pen's tilt or pressure or any of those other things to kind of create it. And it allows you to create a very random effect with your painting, especially the artistic side of things, to get more of a artistic flair with things. For lack of a better way of calling it. You have other options that you could turn on and off based on how you want the brush to run. And it's a bunch of different options. I can't tell you what works best in any given situation because it's just a matter of how you want to paint. That's really what it comes down to. What shape are you painting? How do you want to paint it? How do you want it to look when you're painting that shape? That's really what it comes into more than anything else. So you have those options in the brush settings. Now, more practical options, and I call them practical options because these you can actually work with and it will make sense. And it doesn't require you to have that artistic flair to you. It doesn't require you to be very creative with it. It actually works on a more practical sense with things. So in your options bar is where these particular options are. The first one is your color mode, um, color blend mode. If you go to YouTube, and I want to show you where this is. If you go to good old YouTube and you type in the Photoshop training channel, colon, blend mode. Photoshop training channel, blend mode. If you type that into the search, it will find specifically the blend mode, the blending mode tutorial. You got two of them. One is an 8-minute crash course, and the other one's like a 40-minute detailed information. Take the time and look at either one of them, but really the 40-minute one will give you a lot more details on how blend modes work. Blending modes exist in all of Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and some of the other Adobe and non-Adobe programs. They blend colors together. So it allows you to take a color that you already have sitting there on your canvas, plus another color that you're going to introduce by painting on top of it. So for instance, I could take this red here, and if my blend mode is set to normal and the opacity is set to 100%, when I paint, I'm going to paint this red sitting there. All right. Simple, easy, done. Now, if I go and pick a different color, if I go pick a completely different color, let's say this kind of greenish blue, and I change the blend mode from normal to, I don't know, I'll choose overlay, just picking a color. Now what ends up happening is that color is painted on top of the red. Notice nothing happens to the white area, because white, straight white or straight black is usually neutral, meaning nothing happens with most of these blend modes. But if I paint over what's already there, it's blending with the color that's already there. And it does it over and over again. The more times that I paint on top of the same area, it just paints again and again and again, and you get different extremes. And see, it goes from one extreme to another. So it goes from making everything darker to all of a sudden now it's starting to make things lighter using that same color over and over again. So you get different blending effects based on this blend mode here. So depending on what you pick, depends on what happens. So there's no magic 8-ball to this. This is just you picking a blend mode, and depending on the blend mode you pick, depends on what happens as you paint. Some blend modes can affect the white areas, and some cannot. It just depends on what you choose. You also have an opacity. Opacity is the amount of that color being used at one time. So let me delete this here and start over. When I'm painting with a particular opacity, if I paint at 100%, I get that color applied. Well, there's that blend mode is added to it. Hold on, let me undo that. Let me go back to normal with the blend mode and paint to get that green. If I paint with a lowered opacity value, I'm painting with less of that green. So depending on how low I go with that opacity, depends on how much of that green that I'm painting with at that one time. Here's another thing that's fun though. If you paint over something that's already been painted with that opacity, look at what happens. It paints and adds on. So on this color, which is the one at the top at 100% opacity, nothing basic, nothing simple happened, nothing. But when I paint over this one with a reduced opacity and a reduced opacity, now they're combining together. So kind of like the blend modes, if I paint over the same area with a different opacity or the same one, I paint it over and over and over again, and they kind of layer on top of each other like paint, like layering paint. So that is one neat little effect that happens with just an opacity change. Now, there's another option here called flow. You want to think of flow similar to opacity. It's the ink flowing out of the paintbrush. That's how you want to think about it. By default, it's at 100, but if I have the opacity at 100% and the flow at 100%, then I'm painting with that full color. But if I paint with the flow at a reduced percentage, it looks like at first with the opacity at 100%, then I'm still painting with that full color. But if you pay attention to the edges, see right along the edges, it's kind of faded. Here's what happens with this flow. At 34% with the opacity at 100%, if I just click once in this spot, see, it's kind of faded. It's kind of a faded effect, all right, where it's not 100% of that color. So it's the airflow. It's all, think like a spray can or an air gun or an air brush being painted. I have less air spraying that color out. If I stick in the same spot and kind of hold my mouse in the same spot, it prints more and more of that color. If I click and drag slowly, it kind of gradually fades that color into play. If I go quickly, all right, it's less of that color sprayed at one time. So the coverage of color is a little different. So flow is a very interesting piece to use. It allows you to change the airflow of the color. Combine that with the blend mode and the opacity, you can get different color-based effects based on airflow, the speed at which you click and drag. It's something that you could actually change because this little button right here that looks like a circle with a thing pointing to it that's between the flow and the opacity, that allows you to turn your pressure sensitivity option on your graphic tablet on. So if you have one of those Wacom tablets or something similar, you can kind of use that to kind of adjust the pressure sensitivity, and then things like the airflow and the opacity can be changed accordingly. And again, different color effects that you can do. Makes it kind of fun to play with. There's even an airbrush option that you can turn on that's kind of deprecated because it kind of doesn't work like you want to. But it does work with the flow where if you turn the flow amount down, it's supposed to give you kind of that airflow effect going on, um, like you would have with an airbrush, but I never really see the full effect of it being used a lot of times now. Before, if you had like the graphic tablet and change the opacity and the flow, you would get a particular air spray effect. So the longer you stay in one spot, things will get darker. But if you click and drag over an area, it just pretty much, it's kind of like if you just turn the opacity down, you know, the flow and the opacity ends up looking the same kind of way. So that airbrush option is kind of not that important. Now, smoothing, here's another one that's kind of important depending on if you're using your mouse or if you're using the graphic tablet. So I want you to pay attention to my mouse and the line that gets generated as I click and drag. So as I click and drag, if this smoothing is set to 100%, notice how the line is trailing behind my mouse and kind of like trying to catch up to it. Okay. What smoothing does at 100%, it tries to give you a smoothest line possible. It does that by not painting immediately and kind of let you, if you got the jittery hand, it kind of takes the jitters away. So you get kind of a smooth painted line all the time, even with the jittery hand scenario that you may have. Too much Pez at coffee in your diet or something like that. If you turn the smoothing down, which usually by default is somewhere around a 10 to 20%, what'll happen, what you'll notice is that the line doesn't trail as far behind what you're painting. If you turn it all the way down to 0 with the smoothing, where you paint is tagged along right with the mouse, right with your mouse there. So if you have a graphic tablet, like one of those Wacom tablets again, you can use that smoothing to kind of adjust the fidelity. Like as I'm drawing, do you want it to have like a trail behind you, or do you want to have it like right on where you paint? Depending on how you work, one works better than another, and it's a matter of you adjusting that based on that tablet, that you have. With your mouse, it's for jittery hands. If you have jittery hands or your hand is not as steady as you want it to be that day or at all, then you can adjust the smoothing accordingly. For me, I usually put the smoothing at around the 10% range. That kind of works for me. For my painting needs, that works. Yours may vary and be different.